Ms. Songus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for being here. And General Dunford, I'm not sure that this isn't the first time since you've become chairman, and as a son of Massachusetts, I particularly want to welcome you. It's a proud for all of us that you are in the position that you are today. So thank you both for being here. And I think the discussion we've had today really does reinforce the complexity of the challenge that we face. And we've heard a number of those here today saying it really, I think, underscores the idea that we really need to have a robust debate that involves all of Congress, not just the committees that really need to focus on this, because it is a complex situation. We need to better understand the role of our allies, both Sunni and otherwise, what the costs are going to be over time, what it is going to require of those serving in our behalf. And so I would really like to underscore those who called for the need to have a new authorization for the use of military force. But given the complexities, I just wanted to get to a couple of them. The administration often talks about the 65 countries that are participating in the coalition against ISIL, but roughly 50 of them have never been directly involved in the air campaign, and while many who were participating at the beginning have ceased their military involvement. Can you tell me more about what is behind these countries' hesitations, and in particular, as we're focusing on what we should be sending to the fight, whether or not there is a need for more combat troops, boots on the ground? What is the willingness of this coalition, particularly our Sunni allies, to lend their forces to the fight? So I'll start with you, Secretary Carter.
Well, you're right. We do need them to do more. In Europe, as I said, the attacks in Paris have galvanized the French. The French are coming in very strongly in Syria, which they hadn't done before, and now are very willing to do so. The British are debating it, as I said. The Germans appear, they're certainly capable of doing more. We want them to do more. So I would characterize for Europe, I hope that the Paris attacks galvanize all of Europe to do more, because they need to do more. In Syria and Iraq, elsewhere around the world, and of course in their own homelands, where, to get back to an earlier point made, we share intelligence on homeland security. We depend to some extent upon their homeland security structures when people visit from Europe to the United States and so forth for our own security. And then you mentioned the Gulf states as well.
That's really where my question, I think, is very important.
This is something that we began to discuss with the Gulf states back at the Camp David in the spring. The president did. The natural force in particularly the Sunni areas of Syria and Iraq would be Sunni Arabs, and a more effective and insightful kind of force. They have been unwilling to field such forces.
And what are your challenges in confronting that unwillingness? What is this? Can you talk more about
Well, I'm going to be
I'm
going to be very candid with you, and I said this before. Many of the Gulf states weight air capabilities, air forces and so forth, over ground forces and special operations forces. And I think that if they want to, as we would wish them to, wield more influence in the Middle East and do more to secure this part of the world in which they live too, they're going to need to do more of that on the ground. And buying our airplanes is fine, and we provide them. But when it comes to ground forces and special operations forces, there's no question that they need to build those forces and wield them. They frequently complain to me, for example, about how capable the Iranians are, to which I say, yes, and you're not in the same game, an effective game on the ground.
And it goes to Ranking Member Smith's statement that in the end, the Sunni part of the Muslim world has to take this on in order for it to be long-term effective. General Dunford, I'm running out of time, 5 seconds worth.
not only will we not be successful without our coalition partners, I don't see any way that we can be successful without our coalition partners.
Thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank both of you for being here and for your service to our country. In June of this year, Chairman Thornberry held a Nuclear Deterrence Oversight Week, and we had a series of hearings and briefings. And one of those hearings, we had Deputy Secretary Bob Work and Vice Chairman of Joint Chiefs Sandy Winfield testified, and they both did a great job. Both of them emphasized that in their opinion, nuclear deterrence was the highest priority of DOD, and they reflected on Secretary Hagel's 2014 statement to the force to that effect. Secretary Carter, you now have that job. Do you share Secretary Hagel's view, as well as Bob Works and Sandy Winfield's, that nuclear deterrence is the highest priority for the DOD, and if so, why?
I sure do, and I actually, on Thanksgiving, was calling service members around the world, and one of the folks I called was a missileer who was spending his Christmas in a silo in North Dakota. And I told him exactly that. I said, what you're doing is the single most important thing in the U.S. military. It's not in the news every day, and God help us if it is, but it is the bedrock of our security. And in the final analysis, that it is the ultimate undergirder of American security. And that's why having an effective, modern, safe, secure nuclear deterrent is absolutely critical.
Great. Well, I appreciate you doing that, and because I share that view, and I appreciate the fact that Secretary James is putting a renewed emphasis on that area. It's my hope that you will also do your own statement to the force and be as clear on that issue as your predecessor was. For either one of you, Secretary Work, as well as Vice Chairman Winfield, Admiral Haney, Secretary Kendall, have all made the statement that they believe that the long-range standoff weapon should be pursued to replace the current air-launched cruise missiles. Do y'all share that view, and do you see that progressing at a pace that you find acceptable?
I do definitely support it. Chairman?
I do as well, Congressman. I think it's important. We talked a minute ago about threats to our nation, and I think it's all about flexibility and options, and I think that capability reflects an important option that we ought to have were we to be engaged in a high-intensity conflict.
Do you see the progress toward that LRSO slipping in funding in any way?
Congressman, I personally like to take that for the record. I'm not tracking the profile at this time.
Do you believe that it should be allowed to slip or be canceled?
Well, I know that there's a timeline along which it needs to be met because of the obsolescence of the weapon system it's replacing. So we ought to have it fielded in time to meet the operation requirement, but I don't know what that is right now.
Secretary, do you have anything else to say?
Exactly, to echo, and we get back to you in more detail. There is a schedule to complete it. Like a lot of our nuclear modernization programs, needs adequate funding. That's not an entirely a Defense Department matter, it's Department of Energy matter as well, so we watch it closely. But it's an important system, and we need to manage it with our colleagues in the Department of Energy appropriately. We'll get back to you with some more detail on that. But
great.
Important thing is we support it.
Thank you both very much. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your service. This committee has responsibility to conduct oversight of the administration's strategy for prosecuting the U.S. counter-ISIL campaign, and it's quite appropriate for members of this committee to express their disagreement and disapproval of the administration's strategy. However, the tone of the disagreement, disapproval is important. Politicians know that relentless personal attacks on the president himself provoke a visceral reaction by the American people against the president. And that's a part of our campaign process. But what effect does the unprecedented level of attack on our commander-in-chief have on our relationships with our allies, for instance? What impact does it have on our ability to galvanize our regional and nation supporters to participate in the strategy that we are leading? What impact does it have on the enemies of America who we are leading the strategy against? If I might start by asking that question of you, Secretary Carter, and next of you, General Dunford.
Well, you can ask the question, but I'm not going to respond to it, and I'll tell you why. I serve at the pleasure of President Obama, and obviously support his policies, but we're coming into an electoral season now in the United States, which I respect very much. However, I also very much respect the tradition and necessity of defense to be out of the political swirl. And I intend to conduct myself in that manner over the next year and a quarter or so of my service as Secretary of Defense. And I especially consider it one of my responsibilities to shield our military from that swirl. Their job is to give their professional military advice in a candid manner, no matter what the politics say, and to conduct the nation's operations to protect our people. So with great respect, I understand where you're coming from in terms of your question, but I would prefer not to answer it because of its connection with the electoral cycle.
Well, thank you. I respect that answer. And General Danforth?
Sir, I think it's even more important for me in uniform to have the same position.
Well, thank you. And I assume that it probably does have some impact on our relationship with our allies and all of the other components that we have to work with to successfully prosecute this mission. And I have another question. How many ISIL forces are there in Iraq and Syria?
The estimates are in the neighborhood, but I want to emphasize these are estimates. So Chairman and I are conferring on notes here, estimates in the neighborhood of 30,000. I hesitate to give numbers like that for the reason that I don't think our intelligence information is perfect in that regard, and because they may involve people with varying levels of responsibility or actual adherence to ISIL. Let me see if the chairman wants to add anything to that, but I just ask everyone to take with a grain of salt numbers like that, because we do our best, or our intelligence community does their very best to be accurate, but I at least look with caution upon those estimates. Chairman?
I think that's exactly right, Mr. Secretary, and the estimates have been consistently between 20 and 30,000, Congressman, but I have the same caution in sharing those numbers or actually confirming the veracity of those numbers.
All right, thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Franks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank both of you for being here. Mr. Carter, or Secretary Carter, I remember that you and I had a conversation here many months ago related to the Kurds and the Peshmerga efforts, and to your credit, I think you strongly agreed that they had stood out as an effective force against ISIS. One of the Peshmerga commanders recently voiced a hopeful view of defeating ISIS, in my mind the most hopeful to date. He said, "For the last 15 months that I've been fighting Daesh, I have never seen them so weak they were literally running away." Now that, as you know, is probably a general's effort to try to improve his morale of his soldiers and keep going. But it is clear that they have done a marvelous job. And before ISIS brings a Paris or an Ankara or a Beirut-like attack to the United States, I think it's very important that we really get on the ball here. And as you know, this administration, ambassadors, two secretaries, they pushed back quite a lot related to the amendment that this committee passed to directly arm and support the Kurds. There was a tremendous amount of pushback and resistance to that. And I quite honestly can't fathom the reason for that. But now I guess my question to you is everybody on the same page now? Is there a support now for both the Senate amendment? Okay, so it's in the NDAA. Is there support to try to animate that amendment in a way that would make it most effective? I'm talking about the amendment to support the Kurds now.
Well, we definitely want to support the Kurds, and we want to support Sunni tribes as well. I think the gist of your question is, will we continue to do that with, by and through the government in Baghdad? Now, and our preference is to do that because our preference is to support a multi-sectarian, albeit decentralized, government of Iraq, because the alternative is sectarianism, and down that road we know what lies there. So we continue to support Baghdad in that regard, and therefore when we arm the Kurds, as I indicated in my testimony, the Baghdad government gets to look at the shipments and so forth. It doesn't delay them materially, and so it's not a problem from a
But isn't it true, not to interrupt you,
view.
sir, but isn't it true that CJCS has been arming the Kurds and helping them directly?
I'm sorry, I don't recognize the acronym. I mean, I recognize the acronym, but it's for the chairman.
General Dunford.
When you say CJCS, Congressman?
I understand that the Kurds have been armed directly by this group, so I'm just wondering what I hear you saying two different things. I hear you saying that we should support the amendment that we had here that called for arming the Kurds directly, but that we're still letting the government of Iraq be sort of the referee of it all to make sure that we don't upset them in some way.
What I'm saying is that we do arm the Kurds. By the way, others do as well. I don't know what organization you're referring to, but other countries are arming the Kurds also. We do that with through, in this nominal manner, the government of Baghdad for the larger reason that we support multi-sectarian governance in Iraq, and that's simply the reason why we do it.
But at this point, not to belabor the point here, but at this point, there's a consensus that the administration is now on board with the amendments that we had, or the provisions we had in this NDAA to step up our support for the Kurds.
I don't think it's necessary for us to have language that allows us to directly support the Kurds, because we are able to support the Kurds in the way we're doing it now.
Right.
So we don't need any additional authority. But yeah,
I
share your basic thinking, which is that the Kurds are an effective fighting force. It's important to back them up.
Well, the point is 6 months ago, if we had this kind of support, the landscape might look a lot differently. And I don't like to do the "I told you so" thing at all, but I just am astonished sometimes at this administration's lackadaisical approach to a very dangerous enemy. And I've unfortunately run out of time.
Ms. Spear.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you both for your leadership and service. And Monday morning quarterbacking is always a whole lot easier. And I know that you are, very committed to eradicating ISIS. I'd like to know how many troops you are intending to add to the special ops in Syria. You mentioned, Secretary, that you were intending to do that. How many more are you intending to offer?
Excuse me. Two ways of answering that question. One is the particular operations that we're preparing to conduct now, in Syria with our special operations forces are intended to enable capable local ground forces. I would rather, and I really can't go into what their operations are going to be.
No, I understand that, but we
here.
have about 50 now, and you said...
And they've indicated a number around 50, and the second thing I want to say is that's for starters. If we find more forces that we can enable in this way, we're prepared to do more. I think the chairman and I have repeatedly said that. We're prepared to do more. I have every reason to believe the president will allow us to do more and authorize us to do more when we have more opportunities. We're looking for those opportunities to do more, so we're actually eager to do more, because that will accelerate the defeat of ISIL, but it hinges upon us finding the capable local forces that we can enable in this way. And that's what we're looking for. And every time we find them, we'll enable them. So I would hope and expect, this gets back to the whole question of numbers. The point isn't numbers. The point is capabilities and the ability to enable capable and motivated local forces. The more we find them, the more we'll do.
One other question. You referenced earlier that ISIS is metastasizing. I thought that was a very appropriate word, and also a frightening word. And we know, based on the New York Times article, certainly, that they have become somewhat entrenched in Libya. I presume, without wanting to signal to ISIS that we're recognizing that and taking steps to address that, that you have a plan that you are putting in place to deal with that?
It can't be any secret to ISIL, because we killed their leader in Libya a few weeks ago. So it shouldn't come as any surprise that we're determined to get them wherever they arise. And metastasis is a good word, because these radical cells pop up and multiply, fueled by the internet. This is the first internet terrorist organization, social media, I guess, fueled terrorist organization. So it's a serious and new kind of thing. It does spring up everywhere, and we have to strike it everywhere that we find it, including Libya, and we already have.
You mentioned social media, and their effectiveness on social media has left us somewhat flat-footed, I would suggest. There is some effort to grant you authorization that would allow you to conduct offensive cyberspace operations at the speed in which ISIL threats are coming in. Is that going to make a huge difference in our approach to attack them in cyberspace?
We are looking at, along with law enforcement and Homeland Security, ways of countering them on the internet. I mean, I'll let the law enforcement community speak for itself, but there's a very strong effort on the part of the FBI to identify self-radicalizing individuals in the United States. They do exist, as we know from Chattanooga. And I might want to add, by the way, just by way of clarification, earlier on you were asking about special operations forces in Syria. I was speaking of those that accompany and enable ground forces. I want to say, in addition to that, we are forming and have the Expeditionary Targeting Force. That's a force that wouldn't be on the ground all the time in Syria. It would go in, conduct raids, and go out. I just want to emphasize that.
And how many troops are included in that number?
A larger number. I'd rather give you that in a classified setting, but a larger number.
All right. Finally, the executive order that is required in order for you to... I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. Mr. Conway.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm based on what you've said this morning, having a difficult time getting to the scope of what needs to get done in Syria and Iraq. I know you used some anecdotes that we're making progress and we're gaining momentum. If I'm trying to climb Mount Everest, I can walk 5 or 6 feet up it and look you in the eye with a straight face and tell you I'm making progress. And if I run the next 15 feet, I can tell you I'm gaining momentum. Can you tell me, not specifics, but you tell me that the Department of Defense has a game plan that says this is how many motivated local forces we need, this is everything we've got to go, so that you can share with the committee so we can see the scope of what has to get done in this efforts. Is that laid out in your, not for public dissemination, but for our cause, our point, being able to see what have you done, what needs to get done in the scope of this issue?
Well, I think the outlines of that are very clear that's what the strategy's about.
I got the strategy. I got that, Ash. But how much? I mean, how many local forces and how many X, Ys, and Z? Do you guys know that yet?
Well,
John Dunford?
go ahead, Joe, if you want.
We do, Congressman. We've got the specific numbers of brigades that we think need to be trained in order to have successful Iraqi security forces. So we have a number of objectives.
No, I'm talking about in Syria as well. This is a whole fight. We got
Right.
both countries.
In Syria, to be honest with you, Congressman, I think the military campaign in Syria is designed right now to put pressure on core ISIL while the political reconciliation process takes place.
Okay.
There is not a military solution in Syria.
At some point in time, I think it would be helpful if we had a sense of what this beast looked like. You also mentioned that we spent some period of time studying the oil infrastructure. And I know you weren't there, and you're a Marine, that's not how you do it necessarily, but taking out the tankers and how they move oil from point A to point B, why is it that we just got to doing that last week as opposed to why weren't they the first? I mean, I understand the production facilities and all that kind of good stuff, but the movement itself, why did we wait so long to do that?
Congressman, again, I don't know what the thought process was 6 or 8 months ago. I do know that we have a much better appreciation for the revenue sources of ISIL. Okay. Even, I'll just share this with you. In August, I went around to all of the region as I was in transition to try to get a better sense of ISIL. At that time, there wasn't a clear understanding of how ISIL was generating revenue. Even in the weeks subsequent to August, we started to have a much better appreciation for the source of ISIL revenue, and so started to go after the oil infrastructure and the tankers because we then appreciated how much of an impact that would have.
I guess in the same vein, it looked like the French targets, the first targets they hit, seemed to be targets that we should have hit right off the bat. Is all of that changed now? Are we in a new paradigm? I got the Monday morning quarterbacking nonsense, but going forward, when we see things hit, are we in a position now to hit everything that makes sense from a military standpoint?
The simple answer is, Congressman, I can assure you the answer to that question is yes.
Okay. The Russians are purported to be introducing significant upgraded air defense capability. What impact will that have on our operations and our ability to do what we want to do?
We've watched that development very carefully. That is a very capable air defense system that's been brought in. We have a memorandum of understanding to ensure safety of flight with the Russians. I, as recently as yesterday, spoke to my counterpart, the Russian Chief of Defense, to ensure that they would be compliant with that memorandum of understanding. They have been over the past 30 or 45 days, and I assess today that we have the capability to prosecute the campaign against ISIL, the campaign that we envision with Russia's presence.
Do our pilots have the right rules of engagement if they're engaged?
They do. They do, Congressman.
Okay. Yield back. Thank you.
Ms. Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. And General Dunford, I know you're no stranger to the committee, but welcome in your new capacity as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Before I get into my line of questioning, I just want to point out my support from my colleagues' earlier discussion on the need for Congress to do our job to actually take some action on a new AUMF. I understand the President did submit a draft AUMF earlier this year. We, in fact, had several hearings on it. Secretary Carter, you mentioned that also. But I think that it is vital that we get this right, and the AUMF is part of that. I think the men and women who deploy into harm's way, some of whom may not come back, as is the case of Master Sergeant Wheeler, deserve to know that not only do they have the moral support, but the legal backing of our nation. So I would hope that we here in Congress would devote equal effort to having this debate and talking about the true costs in terms of resources and sacrifices required as we get into the deeper discussion of one strategy over another. So, gentlemen, what I'm concerned with in my line of question is really going to focus on the global strategy against ISIL. And I think that we have not really discussed in this committee so far other regions where ISIL is established outside of the Middle East that I believe pose just as big of a threat, perhaps even more, and I'm thinking in particular of Libya. Patrick Pryor, the DIA's top counterterrorism official, was recently quoted as saying that about ISIL, that Libya is the affiliate that we are most worried about, and that it's the hub from which they project across all of North Africa. while we have a clear and present danger in Syria and Iraq, Mr. Secretary, please explain what the larger military strategy is to confront a global threat and how we're leveraging this different elements of American power, not just our military, and specifically, as much as you can in an unclassified setting, about our efforts to combat ISIL in Libya.
Well, it is, as it must be, a global strategy. It has to be in all media. To go back to the earlier question about messaging and cyber, and while I believe we play a central and essential role, it's not purely a military campaign. It involves all the other instruments, but we are absolutely necessary. We're not by ourselves sufficient. With respect to Libya, we have taken action there in recognition of the fact that because of the continuing political discord in Libya, which has not been resolved. Obviously, we're in favor of a political resolution in Libya, which would lead to decent governance there and therefore not a fertile ground for the growth of ISIL. That political settlement has not occurred, and therefore it is fertile ground for the spread of ISIL, and therefore we're having to take military action there, and I gave you an indication of that already, striking their leadership there. So it is a focus of ours.
Where else other than Libya do you see a real threat from ISIL and their forces? And you know, I'm concerned that I see the general nodding. I'm concerned that there is this training, these areas where there are failed states where ISIL is using as a staging base.
Some of the areas immediately come to mind. Obviously, Egypt is one of the areas where we're concerned. That's where the Russian aircraft was taken down. The Boko Haram group has sworn allegiance and been accepted as a part of the ISIL movement in Nigeria. We've seen ISIL in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. We've seen ISIL in Yemen. We've seen elements of ISIL in Lebanon and Jordan. So it is absolutely a global dynamic.
Thank you. I'd like to return to the discussion earlier about the hold force, Mr. Secretary, in Iraq. Looking at our vision for the future of Iraq and Syria, what political outcomes in Iraq do you envision, and what's your assessment of Prime Minister Abadi and whether he's making the necessary reforms and whether those are going to be enough for this hold force? Are you saying it's hard to find these folks, and when you do, you got to be able to try to keep them, at their stations, but if they're not buying into what they need politically, if they're not getting that, they're going to abandon that role. So what is the political consequences that we need to happen in Iraq in order to maintain the hold force and to gain more folks to become hold forces?
The political future that we're supporting in Iraq and that Prime Minister Abadi says he supports, I've spoken to him and I believe that he supports, but it's difficult to accomplish, is a multi-sectarian but decentralized Iraqi state in which Kurds, Shia, and Sunni can live together under one state, have a reasonable amount of self-governance, not by ISIL in Sunni territory, but by people who can do a civilized job of governance in Sunni territory, and Kurds and Shia all living together under one state, reasonable decentralization and self-governance as appropriate, but under one state and at peace. That's what we're seeking. The alternative to that is a sectarian disintegration of Iraq. We know what that looks like, and we're hoping that Prime Minister Abadi can pursue that road, that he has enough support to do it. We're trying to help him do that. But Baghdad politics, no question about it, are complicated. And his predecessor was not on that road.
I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here and answering questions. I guess the first thing I would ask is, how can you reassure this body that the same administration that left in 2010, no one had the forethought to see ISIS coming, nobody thought it was important that we stay on the Iraqi-Syria border. I served with General Dunford when he was a colonel, working with General Mattis, writing op orders and executing the op orders on the Syrian border in 2003. What's changed? Why should we think that you guys, that the administration's on the right path now? They had a come to Jesus moment, they've changed, and now they understand the significance in this region, whereas they did not before. And you said yourself, one reason you're building momentum now is because you lack the intelligence, capability, human, and otherwise since 2010, which you're now regaining, but it wouldn't have been lost in the first place if this administration didn't squander the infrastructure that we had set up in 2010. Why should we trust you? I guess that's a question.
Congressman, one of the reasons that I changed the structure of our command in Iraq over the last year is because I precisely because I wanted us to have the strength and the insight and the presence of a single senior American military officer in Baghdad. That is now Lieutenant General Sean McFarland, and he is now connected each and every day to the front, literally to the front in Ramadi, to our various areas where we're training Iraqi security forces. He can talk directly to Prime Minister Abadi. He can talk directly to everybody else who is in Baghdad. That is, and has complete command over all of our forces in the fight. By the way, in Iraq and Syria.
I've got a bunch of questions, and I'm going to be out of time.
Well,
I'm asking what's changed.
That's incredible.
You, the answer is you. You have changed, and that was the dynamic that changed.
That's it. Well, I think the ability to have people on the ground in Iraq is essential to effectiveness there, and to have unity of command. We now have that again, and I think that's a good thing. And it does harken back to another era when we once again had it, as General Dunford had it in Afghanistan. It's really critical. We now have that.
Okay, second question. If you were to declare, or not declare war, but we had an authorization of use of military force, would it be against an autonomous state, or would it be against terror worldwide? ISIS flavor.
I kind of like the language in the AUMF that President Obama submitted, and I'll tell you why. Because as I told you, my first question when I was asked to review that was, does it give us what we need to defeat ISIS?
Let me ask you a different way. Militarily, tactically, are you fighting a state? So I don't really care about, they were talking AUMF like philosophy class. What I mean, General Dunford, are you attacking a state, or are you attacking terrorism in the region?
We're fighting extremists who use violence to advance their political goals in the form of terrorism.
What's different than between that and Al Qaeda?
In terms of the basic nature of ISIL and Al Qaeda, there's not a difference from my perspective, Congressman.
The fact that they hold territory and that there are battle lines in this war in Syria and Iraq, that there is a behind enemy lines area. That there are lines of departure that you would cross if you were to go fight them. That's different than Al Qaeda, would you say?
It is. What I was referring to was the nature of the movement. In other words, ISIL and Al Qaeda. In terms of where ISIL is right now, they do in fact hold ground. They have declared a caliphate. I think that was an aspirational goal of Al Qaeda, and it's something that ISIL has actually done today. So that does make it a bit different in the fact that they are currently holding ground and declared a caliphate.
Okay, and in terms of them actually having and holding ground, does that make it harder or easier in that area in Iraq and Syria where they actually hold ground? Does that make it easier or harder to fight them compared to an Al-Qaeda type enemy?
Yeah, I think in this particular case, ISIL is particularly difficult because they are actually using humans as shields in places like Raqqa, Mosul, and Ramadi.
Which is no different than Al-Qaeda in previous wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Correct, but ISIL's location, we know where ISIL is. In the case of Al Qaeda, they blended into the country in a much different way than ISIL is.
Gotcha. With my last 6 seconds, we're still trying to get the Jordanians drones. Been unable to do so because the State Department stopped us. Now they're using Israeli Herons and Chinese Reaper equivalents instead of ours. I think we ought to fix that, Mr. Secretary, if we can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ashford.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, General Dunford. I have asked this before, and I was in the Middle East in February, and we were briefed on these various topics, the intelligence mission, the General Nagata's efforts to form up a Sunni force, and some of the internet issues, the forming up of an internet combative force there in Baghdad, I believe, at that time. And, you know, I'm the home of the 55th Air Wing is in Omaha, near Omaha at Offutt, and has a significant role in this effort. And I, too, support the AUMF issue. I think you're absolutely right. I think you've mentioned that before. I think it's clear that Congress needs to act as quickly as possible in this effort. Here's my question. Because I was there and was able to talk to King Abdullah, and he talked about, you know, putting the flag in the ground and getting ISIS out of the cities and all that sort of thing. And we talked about the intelligence collaborative efforts that were ongoing, and it was impressive to hear those efforts. Would you say that now, 9 months later, there is, I hate to put it, summarize it, but is a significant change today from where we were 9 months ago in our readiness to achieve these goals that we were enunciated 9 months ago? Would that phrase be accurate, Mr. Secretary?
Well, we're constantly looking for opportunities to do more and doing more. So we are doing more than we were 9 months ago. I hope 9 months from now we're doing yet more, because we're looking for opportunities. You mentioned Jordan. We are with King Abdullah and his people working once again to identify, and we have found some people in southern Syria who want to recapture their territory from ISIL, and we're supporting and enabling them. So we're looking to do more, and we're looking for proposals. I look to General Dunford for them. The President looks to me and General Dunford for proposals for how we can do more, and we've found them, and I've given you a number of indications of ways that we have accelerated the campaign over the last few months, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. And I think I don't believe, at least 9 months ago, I don't know if the question was asked on our group, but I don't believe anybody was talking about being at war in a sense. We are in a war footing. I don't think those words were used then. They are now being used. I mean, at least to me and maybe to my constituents back in Nebraska, that being on a war footing is a more significant effort than not. And I guess that would be my. Would you agree with that?
I use the word in the simple sense as a reflection of the necessity and the seriousness of this business.
Thanks. And I would again just say, I think most everyone has said it here today, but the AUMF does seem to be the right way to go. So thank you very much.
Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your service to our country. I think one question I had when maybe we are slow to initiate it, but I'm very glad right now that we're focused on the infrastructure of the country, whether the oil industry, I think the cement industry was mentioned, those sources of revenue that support the regime. But one of the things that was talked about was that we don't want to do the sort of catastrophic destruction of particularly, say, the oil industry, because it would be difficult to reconstitute in the future when ISIS is gone. However, if as a Gulf War veteran, I sort of remember what Saddam Hussein did to the oil industry in Kuwait, and yet they were able to reconstitute that after the war. And so, could you address to me why we simply don't do that sort of catastrophic destruction of the oil industry to completely cut off their revenue, that revenue source, Mr. Secretary?
Sure, I'll start and then the chairman can pitch in. Well, there's a balance to be struck there, but the critical thing is intelligence. And there we have gained the insight that allows us to distinguish, to a very large extent, that part of the energy infrastructure which is being directly exploited from ISIL, from that part which is benefiting the population at large. That's a distinction that is based upon intelligence, and underlies our striking. You may remember an early period, and this does precede the time when Chairman Dunford took over, but we were striking parts of the energy infrastructure which were largely small scale. We thought ISIL operated refining facilities. That proved not to be very effective. But in the course of continuing to study this infrastructure, we've learned which parts directly affect them, and we're striking them, and we think that's going to have an effect on their revenue stream. Let me ask Chairman Dunford.
Congressman, I think we can have it both ways. With the right intelligence and precision munitions, we can conduct destruction that will deny ISIL the use of this infrastructure, and yet leave it in a condition that at some point in the future it can be regenerated.
Okay. Well, I want to suggest to you that part of the strength of ISIS is their ability to govern these territories, and part of that is their ability to sustain the economy. And so a collapse of the economy, it I think, hurts their ability to govern and further degrades them. Let me ask a question about the Syrian refugee issue, and that last July, Turkey and the United States agreed in general terms on a plan that would provide a safe zone along a 60-mile strip of northern Syria along the Turkish border. The United States would provide the air power component of that, and Turkish and possibly Syrian insurgent forces would work together in terms of ground security. Where are we at with this? Because it would seem to me that a lot of the Syrian refugees would like to stay in Syria, and if we could create safe zones for them, that would obviously give them the ability to do that. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Congressman. The idea of humanitarian zones, safe zones, by the way, no-fly zones, zones of various kind, are concepts that we have studied over time. And I'll start with some of the considerations that have gone into that and why we have judged the costs of doing so greater than the benefits. But let me start with the benefits of a safe zone. A benefit for a safe zone would be a place where people who wished to move there could move there and be protected. Now, one has to be careful about who might wish to move there, because people might want to live where they live, and also we wouldn't want to create a situation in which people were expelled from countries to which they'd moved into a safe zone by countries that didn't want them. That's an undesirable outcome. From a military point of view, and I'll let General Dunford elaborate on this, one would need to anticipate that such a zone in Syria would be contested. It would certainly be contested by ISIL, who would want to prove that it wasn't safe. Possibly elements of the regime who would want to prove it's not safe if it's on Syrian territory. So it ends up being a substantial military operation. The Turks, we have discussed things like that with the Turks. They have not offered a force of the size that would do that. So let me stop there and ask General Dunford if he wants to elaborate on that. Well, we have definitely considered those possibilities.
General, if you have a brief additional comment. No. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like that for the record, please.
Yeah.
If they
Well, it's a complex subject that would definitely take more time. Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your service, your patriotism, and your wisdom, and appreciate all that you do for us. International defense, I particularly feel confident to have a leader of Marines at the helm with the new chairman. As a recent Iraq veteran, I am concerned about the fact that 5 years after we left, we now have to go back. And in my new role on this committee, I want to make sure that we get it right this time. And after we do militarily defeat ISIS, we don't find ourselves putting troops back into Iraq again for a third or fourth time. So, Mr. Secretary, can you just tell us what is the mission statement right now for the operation in Iraq?
Well, Congressman Moulton, you're getting to the heart of our strategy. And this is not only the part that is essential, but also the part that makes it difficult to achieve, and that is that we want a victory over ISIL that sticks. And that means forces that participate in the recapture of territory and thereafter govern it in a decent manner, so that we don't have a new wave of ISIL or ISIL coming back. That's necessary in both Iraq and Syria. Those are two different cases, but that's why we pursue multi-sectarian governance, decentralized multi-sectarian governance in the state of Iraq, and why we're trying to find a political solution to the Syrian civil war. Because while it's important to defeat ISIL, it's important to defeat them in a lasting way. And that is a critical part of the strategy and the reason why we are so intent upon identifying and enabling capable and motivated local forces.
Chairman Dunford, can you just answer that question? What is General McFarland's mission statement?
Yeah, to disrupt, to degrade, and to defeat ISIL.
And so my concern is that we haven't seen enough integration of the political side here, that we don't have a political plan that really underlies what our military mission is. And we've heard that from the need for that from General Petraeus, General McChrystal, Ambassador Crocker, people on the left and the right who have testified before the committee and have written about this problem in the press. Can you speak a bit to that coordination, that planning, and your confidence that General McFarland and others on the ground can see a political end state that will stick and make all their military efforts worthwhile?
Yeah, Congressman, it's a great question. And frankly, what you said a minute ago about not wanting to go back in 5 years is something that we all feel strongly about, which is why right now, as difficult as it would be, I do support the objective of a multi-sectarian unified Baghdad, because I see that as the best prospect for a stable, secure Iraq that would not be a sanctuary for violent extremism in the future. So as difficult as it is, I think that's a fair objective. Clearly, there are many difficulties in pursuing that, not the least of which is the Iranian influence. But General McFarland's working very closely with Ambassador Jones. You've probably been over to visit them, to enable the Abadi government to stand up on its own, to provide the kind of support it needs to be independent of influence from outside actors, particularly the malign influence of Iran. So the overall objective to me is clear, but the path to getting there is difficult at best. But again, I don't personally have a better idea than to enable the current government of Iraq to be successful, to provide the kind of stability and security within which we won't see organizations like ISIL. And if at any point in the future, Congressman, I believe that assumption that we can get there no longer obtains, then I would recommend a completely different campaign strategy or campaign plan to get after ISIL inside of Iraq.
Are you receiving the support and involvement of the State Department necessary to achieve those political aims?
I believe we are. In fact, since I've been in the job now, we've had 2 separate meetings with Department of Defense leadership and Secretary Kerry, and we meet about every 3 or 4 weeks on specific issues in the campaign. I think it's fair to say that there was a recognition, Secretary Carter and Secretary Kerry recognized that we weren't as integrated across the government as we should be. And so about 2 months ago, we began to meet on a periodic basis to attack specific issues. So far, the oil issue is actually an outcome of the first meeting that we had, and the most recent meeting was on foreign fighters, because that clearly requires a whole of government. But again, I would tell you, am I satisfied with the level of integration? No. We're working on that. Am I satisfied that it's going to be easy to get after the desired political end state in Iraq? No, I don't think so. I think it's going to be a hard slog. But the cardinal direction to me is clear.
General, I have a couple seconds left. If we had retained that level of integration after 2009, would we be in the mess we are today in Iraq?
It's fair to say the conditions would be much different.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Gibson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the witnesses being here today. Thanks for your leadership. I'm going to be moving in a direction actually similar to Mr. Moten. Let me just state up front, strategy, ends, ways, and means. Administration has been under fire in the media to some degree because there's the claim that the strategy is the same. Well, ends may be similar. I'm hoping that I get clarification that ways and means are changing, because if we're just doing the same thing, I don't see how it's the end result's going to be any different. Vantage point, I had multiple tours in Iraq myself, including the culminating one as the G3, a multinational division north. So I'm I'm very keenly aware of the challenges in many regards, including the political military challenges in Iraq. But let me say this, that I associate myself, I think many of the opening remarks that you made, Mr. Secretary, I can attest to. You talked about how there needs to be more Sunni inclusion in this state. I was very frustrated that in the period when Iraq was unraveling, Mr. Maliki, certainly leading in a very corrupt and sectarian way, I didn't feel that we were using the leverage, the ways and means. I didn't think that we were using our leverage. I thought was fairly significant, given the fact that Iraq gets a vote. But we still had leverage I didn't think that we had used in the political military sphere. Now, my question has to do with this interagency process, which I recognize you are only a part of, but you are a major player in that process. So I'd like to know, I've got 3 different areas. Iraq first, what's different in terms of our leverage so that we can bring it to bear, especially in this period where we have a new leader in Iraq, where I think we can shape this relationship so that we will see some of the things that you laid out in your initial testimony, that it would actually come to fruition. On Syria, I completely concur that the political transition is necessary. I'm interested to know, we had Geneva I, Geneva II, what vehicles are we going to use, might we create, so that we can get some compellence on that score? And then thirdly, worldwide, I again agree that the long-term issue is cutting off the ability to recruit and fundraise for this enemy who really is fraudulent. Says they advance the cause of Muslims. Nothing could be further from the truth. No one kills more Muslims than the Islamic State. So again, in terms of ways and means, what's different in terms of this strategy that we think that we're going to make progress?
I'll start, Congressman, then maybe the chairman wants to. First of all, thank you for your own service. Appreciate that. And to your next point about reconstituting our leverage in Iraq, that is precisely the point I was making earlier. And I think General McFarland is doing that. That's important both to have insight and to wield our politico-military leverage in Baghdad. That's important, and a Prime Minister is to also agree with you. Prime Minister Abadi, as opposed to Prime Minister Maliki, gives us more opportunities to do that. And so that's very important, and we do try to leverage that both in our military ways and in our political, our assistance, our marshalling of international assistance. So we do have leverage in Baghdad.
Mr. Secretary, if I could just for 1 second, I appreciate the comment. What I'm looking at is, are we using metrics so that we are sitting side by side with them and being very clear in our communication that the funding that they're getting by the goodwill of the American taxpayer is at risk, and they will lose it if they don't show progress on these metrics? That's the kind of leverage I'm talking about.
Well, that's the kind of leverage I'm talking about too, and the answer is yes. And let's start with Iraq, and then Chairman, I don't mean.
Congressman, you asked about ways, so just some of the ways that are different in metrics. So I'll just answer the metrics one quickly. One example is the specific number of Sunni that we think need to be integrated and trained is a metric, and we are working that with the Iraqi government. That's a recognized objective, and they know our support is contingent upon them meeting certain conditions. In terms of ways, just to recapture some of the things we spoke about today, Special Operations Forces in Syria is a different way. The Expeditionary Targeting Force that will be deployed to Iraq is a different way. The Foreign Fighter Initiative that has taken place over the past couple of weeks between the State Department, the Department of Defense, the CIA, the FBI, Homeland Security, and so forth, is a different way to approach the foreign fighter challenge, and that's something now over the last 3 or 4 weeks where I've seen a much more concerted effort and a will to start to work that issue, recognizing how important it is. And probably the last one is the more comprehensive approach that we're taking to go after the revenue sources is another way that is different from the past.
Mr. Gallego.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Carter, trying to piece together what it actually means to have a expeditionary targeting force, without going obviously into too much detail and violating OPSEC, what does this mean? Is this a constituted group of Iraqi soldiers? Are we talking special forces? What exactly is this? TAC teams? Is this, kind of just thrown on us today. So I think we'd like to know a little more what we can. What is this? What are you envisioning here?
I will. I want to avoid some detail, but this is a force that is either American only, or more likely a mixed force. And to give you two examples, so this doesn't tell you anything about our plans going forward, but the two examples I gave were the rescue of the individuals who were about to be hostages, or prisoners really, who were about to be executed by ISIL. That was accomplished with Kurdish forces, a mixture of U.S. and Kurdish, and was achieved its objectives, although it required the sacrifice of one heroic American to do that. Another example is the killing of Abu Sayyaf and the capture of his wife. So those are two examples that have been disclosed of exactly that kind of capability. Now imagine that on a standing basis, being able, when occasions arise, and that really means intelligence-fed, to conduct raids like that anywhere in the territory of Syria and Iraq. That's what we're talking about. And that is, as the chairman says, a new way of achieving our objective there, one of several, and there'll be more.
Okay. And follow-up question, what is the status on Ramadi and Mosul? We've been hearing about the Iraqis and Kurds surrounding and for months working on surrounding and getting closer and closer to Ramadi, but still, we're waiting for them to move. And, I worked with Iraqi soldiers too in the ING, and they're just as good as their leadership is. And to see them dilly-dallying to take these two major cities, I think is very frustrating for many of us, including a lot in the public. So I'd love to have a status of what's going on besides the usual, they're working at it.
Congressman, I think I share your frustration, as do the commanders on the ground. They would tell you today, and this is something we get an update on every day, that over the past several weeks, real progress in terms of on the ground, real progress in kind of tightening the noose around Ramadi has taken place. But it's certainly not moved at the pace that we would want to see it move. And we're prepared, frankly, to provide more support to reinforce the success that the Iraqi security forces have in Ramadi, but they haven't moved as fast as we want them to move. And so, the progress that has been made over the last several weeks, while real, is not necessarily significant. And Mosul is a future operation for Iraqi security forces. Right now, the focus is on Ramadi. Once Ramadi is taken, recently, as the Secretary outlined, if you start thinking north of Baghdad, Beji has fallen. The Peshmerga have been successful up in Sinjar area, so you're starting to close the noose. We've cut the lines of communication at Sinjar between Mosul and Raqqa. So Mosul is a future operation. Probably, I wouldn't have fixed a date to it, but probably sometime months from now, as opposed to weeks from now, we would start to see operations in Mosul.
Thank you.
Mr. Scott. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here, and thank you for your service to our country, and I certainly respect you and trust you. If you tell me something, I believe it's true, and I know there were some frustrations expressed earlier. I guess as just kind of a simple thing, just a couple of weeks ago, this committee was in classified briefings. The next day, the Obama administration came out and announced what they considered a strategy of sending 60 troops, 60 special operators into Syria. But they did not have the opportunity to discuss that with Congress because Congress was on vacation. That was an absolute lie from the administration. We had been in meetings the day before, and they withheld that from us. And so when it comes to those types of issues, it would be helpful if other people in the administration would be honest with this committee. We take this job very seriously, just as I know you two do as well. With regard to ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, whatever we want to call them, Secretary Carter, you made it very clear we're at war. Secretary Hagel said we're at war well over a year ago with them. The President disagreed with that assessment at that time. I do think he has come around to that now. But it seems that our military lines are conflicting with the goals of the Secretary of State, who wants a political solution. Political solutions can take decades, and I would respectfully submit that the longer we allow ISIS to grow while we're waiting on that political solution, the harder it's going to be to defeat them militarily. So Secretary Kerry testified before this committee that they had been working for years to undermine Assad and to move him out. Has Secretary Kerry indicated to you who he would like to replace Assad, since they have been working to move him out?
I don't want to speak for Secretary Kerry, but I do know that in those negotiations dating back now years, the United States and Secretary Kerry, among others, has discussed with the other parties that have a stake and a voice how Syria would be governed post-Assad. That involves both the naming of names, and I can't repeat them for you, but most importantly, that the structures of the state of Syria that have not been associated with the oppression of their people, but that can be part of responsible governance in Syria going forward, are preserved under new leadership. That's the key to the political transition. And to your point about the difficulty of that, you bet it's difficult, because that's why the civil war has been raging there for several years. But in order to have an end to ISIL on the territory of Syria that sticks, there needs to be that political transition. That's why the military and the political...
If I could interrupt, I'm sorry. I know. Well, so there is no plan for who would replace Assad, just that they want to replace Assad. But it would be just as complex, would you not agree, as finding leadership in Iraq that would be accepting of religious minorities?
Again, I don't want to speak for Secretary Kerry, but these are exactly the kind of talks that he is having with the Russians, the Iranians, and others, so that there can be something that replaces Assad, that provides decent governance for the state of Syria, which Lord knows really deserves it. Joe, you want to add to that?
I think it would certainly be wise for us to at least engage in honest dialogue with the Russians. If there is going to be an effort to remove Assad, they certainly, that dialogue should be occurring at the highest levels among our countries.
It is.
I want to switch gears for just a second and talk about the recapitalization of our program. Obviously, we're involved in a tremendous number of countries, tremendous need for intel, the recapitalizations, and the importance of the J-stars. I just wanted to mention that because of the, if we wait much longer on that, Mr. Secretary, we're going to end up with a gap in that capability because of the major depot maintenance that the current units are going to be going through. So I know our combatant commanders need the J-stars, and I just, I hope that we can move forward with that recapitalization sooner rather than later.
It's an important issue in our budget discussions going on right now. Looking forward to the submission of our FY17 budget. Absolutely.
Well, thank you both for being here, and I respect both of you. I would ask that you use your credibility with the administration and encourage them to be more open and honest with us.
Mr. O'Rourke. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, to go back to some comments and questions that you answered earlier, if we are in fact at war, how will we know when we have won?
The destruction of ISIL entails their expulsion from any territory they claim to occupy, and their destruction elsewhere around the world, including their various branches and so forth. That's the...
So as long as ISIL is in Iraq or Syria or Libya or Afghanistan or anywhere else in the world, we will still be at war?
I believe that in today's world, these threats are difficult to confine to one place, and that is the reason why we have to go there and why we have to go to Syria and Iraq and strike at it and strike at other places where it is. It's in the nature of today's world, mobility among peoples. You see that underline this, and above all, mobility of information, which can radicalize people who've never gone anywhere except on their keyboard.
I think it's important, if we are at war, to define in the clearest, most precise terms what victory looks like with 14 years of Afghanistan in mind, with the fact that we've been in Iraq off and on since 2003, or you could take it all the way back to 1991, to keep us out of perpetual war. I think it's really important that we explicitly define the objectives and the outcomes for which we're fighting. I think we owe that to our service members. I think we owe that to ourselves. And I would hope that we could come up with a better definition of victory and success. I appreciate that you acknowledge the importance of political and diplomatic components of a solution in Iraq or in Syria. But I'm interested in your response to a question asked by Mr. Gibson in terms of conditionality. There's so much in those countries, we'll just use Iraq as an example, that we do not control and cannot control and will not be able to predict when it comes to the political outcomes. And so when we say that we are going to set conditions on our aid, when we say that we are going to set conditions on our military presence, do we really mean that? Is that a viable threat? Will we really walk away from Iraq if the government there doesn't meet those conditions? And I think that's an important question because if, in fact, we will not, then I wonder what the motivation is for the Iraqi government to take the very important and very difficult steps to integrate these other minorities, whether they be Kurds or whether they be Sunnis, into a functioning government, decentralized or otherwise.
First of all, with respect to the first part of your question, your point gets back to the military and political going together, because in addition to the only end state that involves the lasting defeat of ISIL is one in which there is local governance that cannot be once again supplanted by ISIL. That's why the political and the military go together. That's at the heart of the strategy. And that's why enabling capable and motivated forces who can make victory stick is the other part of the definition of victory, critical to the strategy. With respect to the leverage, I'll start there in Baghdad, but the leverage involves offering to do more for those who are pursuing the same objectives and withholding our support from those who are taking a different path or not going down the path they're supposed to. So we find alternatives. We find people who will act if we can't, if the people that we're dealing with are not capable of that, because we have to act, and we will find such forces that are capable.
Very, very quickly for General Dunford, what does ISIS want us to do, and how does that factor into our strategy in confronting them?
ISIS wants us to be impetuous right now, as opposed to be aggressive. And they would love nothing more than a large presence of U.S. forces on the ground in Iraq and Syria so they could have a call to jihad.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank Secretary Carter and General Dunford for being here today. You obviously have a tremendous task. From everything you said, the diversity of what you're trying to accomplish. I think what you heard from members here is that we have some concern about whether or not we have the right strategy in total. But needless to say, Russia just added a different dimension by putting forward their advanced surface-to-air missiles. How does that change, if we're talking about a no-fly zone along Turkey, how would that change that dimension for us? Do they gain a higher ground on us at this point?
Congressman, in view of the fact that the chairman just spoke yesterday to his counterpart in Russia, let me ask him to answer that.
Congressman, under the current conditions, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Russians that ensures our safety of flight. And again, we're not complacent. We don't take it for granted, but it's been in place now for over a month, and the Russians have complied with it. And as I mentioned earlier, I spoke to my counterpart as recently as yesterday to ensure that the Russians reaffirm their commitment to the memorandum of understanding. But you're asking a hypothetical scenario. For example, were we to have a no-fly zone, and were we then, by having a no-fly zone, to have declared war against Syria, because that's what we would be doing if we declared a no-fly zone, particularly with accompanying ground forces to protect refugees, as it has been suggested, then we could expect that that would complicate then the situation inside of Syria. That's a hypothetical. I mean, today I'm confident that we can prosecute the campaign against ISIL. If we were at war against Syria and Russia was supporting Syria, the presence of the SA-21 clearly complicates the situation. It doesn't mean we can't deal with it, but it complicates it.
I appreciate that. Going back on November 7th at the Reagan National Defense Forum, former Undersecretary of Defense Policy Michelle Flournoy argued that putting cards in our hand in that Syria, so the outcome of any political negotiations support U.S. interests. Condoleezza Rice and Robert Gates argued in the Wall Street Journal that we must create a better military balance of power on the ground if we are to seek a political solution acceptable to us and our allies. And General Dunford, you testified in front of SASC on October of 2015, and you said, I think that the balance of forces right now are in Assad's advantage. So my question is, does that still hold true? And if that's so, what steps should we take to change that advantage into our advantage?
When I testified in October, Congressman, we didn't have any capable ground forces to prosecute the campaign inside of Syria. Since that time, we have developed a relationship with the Syrian Arab Coalition. When I say we didn't have any effective ground forces, the YPG was there. We were providing some limited support to them. We had other small numbers of forces that had gone through our original train and equip, but we didn't have a credible force that could actually conduct offensive operations. Since that time, we do have now a force that has conducted successful offensive operations, most recently in a location called Al-Hal. That's an organization, Syrian Arab Coalition, of some 3,000 to 5,000, but part of a broader relationship with the YPG that probably runs north of 15 or 20,000 forces. So we have sufficient forces to conduct offensive operations in Syria.
So does that change the balance then that you had referred to?
It changes the balance. It changes the balance, but I would not say today that we have, the correlation of forces is in anything other than Assad's favor in terms of protecting what he holds dear, which is the west part of the country and his regime. He has the capability to do that with the support provided by Russia and Iran.
As we move forward, and I think most of us are concerned, and I am, particularly as a father of 3 service members, is, are we going to be in the same position? I think you've heard this echoed before. If we pull out of Iraq again, are we going to be in the same position that we find ourselves today? Or are we going to actually keep a residual force in Iraq to assist with the train and equip mission of the Iraqi forces? Do we see us doing that, keeping additional forces in Iraq, if we defeat ISIL?
Congressman, all I can talk to you about is the recommendations that I would make at the time, and certainly I think we have enduring interests in the region. We have an enduring interest in the stability and security of Iraq, and any recommendations I make subsequent to the defeat of ISIL would reflect those interests.
I appreciate that, General. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have 5 more members. Hopefully not everybody will take 5 minutes. Are y'all okay with that, Ms. Secretary? Does that work with your?
Let me just check, because I know I'm traveling somewhere and have how am I doing, Dave? Okay. You could also offer, stay.
That's why I'm asking.
Take, but let's keep going. And if I need to leave, Chairman Dunford just indicated he'd be willing to stay a little bit longer.
Man, that's taking one for the team. Ms. Gabbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your service. Since our policy to overthrow the Syrian government of Assad has brought us really into a potential direct head-to-head military conflict with Russia, I have some important questions along this line. Approximately how many nuclear warheads does Russia have aimed at the U.S. and the U.S. have aimed at Russia?
Congressman, I will get you those precise numbers as best we know them. Let me just summarize it by the fact that we have I'm confident, a strong, safe, secure, and reliable deterrent. But it's also true that Russia, like the Soviet Union that precedes it, has a massive nuclear arsenal.
Right, and it would be accurate to say that both of our countries have the capacity to launch these nuclear weapons within minutes.
We do.
I've seen pictures, films, and images from Nagasaki and Hiroshima. I know you have as well. And I presume you would agree with me that nuclear war would be devastating to the American people. The amount of suffering that it would cause and the devastation to our families, our children, our communities, our planet, our future generations is difficult to imagine. So I'm wondering if there's been an assessment on how many lives would be lost and the damage that would be done if this nuclear war between our two countries were to occur.
Congresswoman, I've been doing this for a long time, including during the Cold War, and working on nuclear weapons since the beginning of my career. And to answer your question, there have been estimates made right along when there was the Soviet Union, then a Russia, and it's a very simple story. It is, as you say, nuclear war would be a absolutely unprecedented and result in catastrophic destruction. That is why deterrence is so important. That's why prudence in the field of nuclear matters by leaders all over the world is so essential.
So the fact that we now have our F-15s patrolling the Turkey-Syria border with that primary air-to-air combat operation, there's no air-to-air combat against ISIS. They don't have any air assets. So I can only presume that the purpose of these planes would be to target Russian planes. Is that accurate?
Congressman, let me answer the point you began with, which is we have a different view, a very different view from Russia about what would be constructive for them to do in Syria. We have that disagreement. We can't align ourselves with what they're doing. We're opposing and want them to change what they're doing in Syria. That's not the same as the United States and Russia clashing. I think that the chairman and his counterpart in Russia just talked yesterday about making sure that we didn't, by accident, have any incident involving U.S. and Russian forces. So we have a sharp disagreement there, but that's not the same as blundering into a armed situation with one another. And
But that sharp disagreement, sorry, I only have a minute here, that sharp disagreement with two diametrically opposed objectives, one, the U.S. seeking to overthrow the Syrian government of Assad, Russia seeking to uphold the Syrian government of Assad, creates that potential, that strong potential and strong likelihood for that head-to-head combat or that head-to-head military conflict. And Russia's installation of their anti-aircraft missile defense system increases that possibility of whether it's intentional or even an accidental event where one side may shoot down the other side's plane. And that's really where the potential is for this devastating nuclear war, for something that could blow up into something much larger.
I have to correct something, Congressman, that you said, which is that I would characterize Russia's perspective differently. And by the way, what they say and what they do are two different things. What they said they were going to do was fight ISIL and pursue a political transition. and not support Assad endlessly, but instead try to pursue a political solution. What they've done militarily has had the effect of supporting Assad, no question about it, and they haven't gone after ISIL. They've gone after moderate. That's our source of disagreement. We're having that disagreement and trying to get them to come around. That is what Secretary Kerry's doing, to a more reasonable and constructive position. But at the same time, as the chairman's efforts indicate, we are, and the Russians agree with this, intent upon avoiding an accidental situation in the air over Syria.
Dr. Winstrup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you, gentlemen, both, not only you, but your families for the sacrifices you make to help defend this country, and it's appreciated. Mr. Secretary, you said that, we will win. We will defeat ISIS. You said that here today, and so I want to ask General Dunford in that strategy, what is our center of gravity really here in this fight to defeat
The center of gravity for ISIL?
Yes, sir.
The center of gravity for ISIL, in my assessment, is the existence of a caliphate. Critical capabilities include their narrative and also the manpower that they have. So those are the three primary sources of strength, if you will. The existence of the caliphate is there. But to define defeat, what I would say, because there was discussion earlier, what we want to ensure is that that ISIL does not have either the capability, capability to conduct external operations that present a risk to the American people or our allies.
So you feel we're going after those factors that make up the center of gravity?
We are going after their critical capabilities to include their center of gravity, which is, again, the existence of the caliphate, the fact that they have a narrative. And when I talked about foreign fighters, that's a piece of this manpower issue, meaning we're keeping them from having the manpower necessary to fight.
I understand. We talked about the coalition, and it was mentioned before, we have like 60-some nations part of the coalition. France has been part of this coalition, but obviously they've stepped up. 60 nations, I imagine some of them may be just contributing a box of pencils or something, because we really don't hear much of what they're doing. Do you feel like we're doing enough diplomatically to get these 60 nations fully engaged in this battle of good versus evil that we're engaged in? Because it would really like to see these other nations engaged, especially our Middle Eastern allies, if we're going to see victory in this.
We need more contributions from the members of the coalition. You're right, it's good to have political support. It's good to have such widespread political support. I mean, just about everybody in the world recognizes that ISIL is an evil thing and ultimately a threat to them. But they're not backing up, as we are trying to back up our words with deeds, and we're in there swinging, and we need more who are in there swinging with us. And that, in my mind, applies particularly to those countries that reside in the region itself. We're a long way away, and we're concerned, and we're doing our part, and they're right there.
I know it's not totally your lane for that component of the fight, but I do think that we need to put more pressure on State Department or wherever to gain more support physically from our allies. A quick question, if I can, General Dunford, as far as congressional notifications of Guantanamo detainee transfer decisions. Have you or General Dempsey before you non-concurred with any of those?
I have not. I've only had 2 cases since I've been the chairman, and I concurred with both.
Did General Dempsey, do you know?
I believe that he may have. I wasn't there, Congressman.
So I'd have to ask that to him. And we've been waiting for a plan on that. Is the delay in the plan have anything to do with the cost of closing Guantanamo or of transferring patients to the United States? Do you know if Office of Management and Budget have had anything to say on that, what their estimates have been?
Well, cost is one of the considerations in the proposal. And just to relate the whole story, we are working to put together a proposal which we would submit to the Congress.
Has OMB done one at this point? Have they done one at all?
They have worked with us on the cost estimate.
What did they come up with?
Well, there's a range depending upon where the permanent detention facility would be and what its nature would be. So there's a lot of work.
Some ideas.
Well, I think
they did one.
Well, the objective is to I mean, let me just start at the beginning, which is that you talked about transfers, but there are people in Guantanamo Bay detention facility who will not be transferred. It's not safe to transfer them. And those are the people that we're talking about detaining under law of war detention. Now, we'd like to do it in a way that costs less and takes fewer of our people.
I guess what I'm after is trying to determine.
And OMB has been helping with that, yes.
Well, trying to determine what the cost is of holding him in the U.S. versus at Guantanamo.
Exactly.
I believe they've done a study. I was curious what they
Exactly, they have, and that'll be part of the proposal that's brought to you.
Okay, thank you. I yield back. Appreciate it.
Mr. Byrne?
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your patience. I know you've sat over here for a lot of questions. Mr. Secretary, you said in your comments that President Obama is committed to doing what it takes as opportunities arise, as we see what works, and as the enemy adapts until ISIL is defeated in a lasting way. The President is the only commander-in-chief that we've got. We can't be the commander-in-chief under our constitutional form of government. You have to report to him. But this President has said that ISIL is a JV team. The day before the Paris attacks, he said they were contained. You're an honorable man. You believe every word that you're telling us. I understand that. When I go to the Middle East, when others of us go to the Middle East and talk to leaders there, they say there's a lack of American leadership, and that's a problem. Now, I don't think that lets them off the hook, by the way. I think that they have a role that they should play, and they need to step up. But you made those comments, and to people like me who doubt the President is committed, and I have a lot of constituents that doubt it, and I think some of our friends in the Middle East doubt it, what would you say to me and to people like me that have doubts that he truly is committed?
Excuse me, Congressman, the only thing I can say is to repeat what I've said before, which is President Obama has given his approval to all of the acceleration steps that I described to you today, many of which were devised by, let alone recommended by, the chairman, CENTCOM, our military leadership. So every time we have turned over a new way of attacking ISIL, we've gotten the President's approval. That I can tell you. And to your point about American leadership, I agree with you. I think American leadership is critical. On the other hand, we need followers too, and we need to insist upon that. But American leadership is still important, very important. It's critical. We not only have the finest fighting force the world has ever known, but we have values that people find attractive. That's why we have so many friends and allies. But we need them to do more alongside our excellent men and women who are in the fight.
Mr. Secretary, let me ask you another question. You were talking in response to some other questions about a possible new AUMF. When your predecessor, Secretary Hagel, was here, we had a discussion then, and he had his lawyer with him. So this may be a question that you may want to refer to your lawyer. I've looked at the two AUMFs that are out there. I'm not a military person, but I am a lawyer. So I think I can look at them and understand them. But I don't think you have to be a lawyer to understand them. Now that you're telling us that we're sending special operations forces into Syria, can you tell me where in any one of those AUMFs there's the authorization to do that?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I've read them too, so I can tell you the common sense meaning of the provision, and the only one that I'm familiar with, which is the one the President submitted. And I was asked earlier, one of the reasons why I thought it was important to me that it allow what I thought was essential to defeat ISIL.
Yeah, that's the one we haven't adopted. I'm talking about the ones that have actually been passed by Congress and signed by the President. Do they give you that authorization?
I apologize. I can't speak to them. I don't know all the other ones. I've studied the one that the President submitted.
Could you get your lawyers to respond to me on that? I'm not asking you to give a legal opinion, but they've got some basis for thinking that, and I would say that the plain wording of those two AUMFs that have been passed by Congress and signed by the President don't. Now, I would like to give you that authorization. I want to make sure we give you whatever you need to do.
Happy to get back to you.
The last question I have is about, and I completely agree with you, we need local forces, we need help from the region, and we shouldn't let anybody off the hook. Are you getting the sort of support that you feel, are we getting the support we should be getting from Turkey?
I've been urging actually since I came into this job, Turkey to do more. We need Turkey to do more. We need it to do more within its own territory so it controls its border, which it has not done effectively since ISIL first arose, that it goes after the facilitators, the enablers, and the other tentacles of ISIL that intrude into Turkey. We would like them to operate more both in the air and on the ground. Most of their air operations are not directed at ISIL. They're directed at the PKK, which we understand their concern about. It's a terrorist organization within their borders, but we'd like to see them do more against ISIL. Now, I know the President has spoken to President Erdogan about this as recently as in the last few days. So it is very much at the top of our list, and we'd like them to do more. Their geography, I mean, they're right there next to Iraq and Syria, so they can be a potent source of enablement for us. At the same time, if they're not doing enough, it's a serious matter, and that's why the President's talking to President Erdogan.
My time is up. I want to thank both of you for your service and for being here today.
Ms. McSally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service and your time today. Secretary Carter, we talked in June about, as an airman, my concerns about not using air power for all that it brings to the fight. My concern about doing that in a weak way. We sort of disagreed on that, but it seems like there's been a slight change since then. You know, ISIS's strength is that they're a state. Their weakness is also that they're a state, as you mentioned, General Dunford. I feel like part of our challenge is we're stuck in a counterinsurgency mindset, and although we need to have a force on the ground afterwards, we need to take them out as a state, not as a counterinsurgency. And the discussion of how you've been studying the oil infrastructure, I mean, this reminds me of air campaign planning I went through when I was a young officer. You identify those center of gravities or critical capabilities and vulnerabilities, and then you unleash American air power in a way that overwhelmingly goes after them. To defeat them in a way that takes away their capabilities. So I don't understand why that study wasn't done. It was done in the spring. Why that wasn't done 17 months ago when they declared a caliphate, or 15 months ago, or 10 months ago. I mean, we're just now realizing oil trucks are moving, and I mean, it's been reported since the very beginning. It's been $1 million a day funding their terrorism. By my math, that's about $500 million that potentially they've been put into their coffers to fund and export terror. So I'm deeply concerned about the lack of using American air power for all it brings to the fight. We've averaged about 15 strikes a day. We've heard about cumbersome approval processes, unnecessarily high rules of engagement, where pilots are going home and not hitting legitimate targets because we want no civilian casualties, as opposed to the law of armed conflict, which is very clear to hit those targets, hit them hard, and destroy and defeat them where they are. The concern and the problem is, I hear you're saying something's changed, but you mentioned a snowball effect. The snowball's been going in their direction for the last 17 months. I serve on Homeland Security as well. We've got 30,000 foreign fighters. We've got 200,000 pro-ISIS social media posts a day. We have 900 cases in all 50 states right now for homegrown extremists. It looks like they're taking on American air power and they're winning, and that has added to their propaganda. It's added to their metastasizing. It's added to the sort of romantic approach of recruiting people to join the fight. The only thing worse of not engaging is to engage weakly, and I really feel weakly, W-E-E-K. And I really feel that we have added to that by being weak on the military side. It sounds like you're saying things have changed, but in addition to the changes you mentioned, are we changing the cumbersome approval process? Can we feel a confidence that we're going to unleash and unshackle American air power and not just be in this limited, sort of impotent mindset?
Congresswoman, I think to the extent that you're asking, are we going to unleash air power, we will. In terms of cumbersome approval processes, where we find those kinds of things, I can tell you, I can assure you, I will help personally to try to cut through it. That's not what I'm getting now. With regard to collateral damage, though, I don't think in this fight we should apologize for bringing our values to the fight in terms of collateral damage. So while we should absolutely be aggressive in attacking ISIL, taking down their command and control, taking away their resources, taking away their fighters, at the same time, I don't think we should be killing innocent people, which would merely feed the narrative of ISIL at the same time. So I think the strategic approach is exactly right, which is we go after all those targets, but we do it in a uniquely American way, bringing our values to the fight with us. And I'm not saying you're suggesting we would do otherwise.
Always minimize collateral damage. I mean, that's what we do.
So I think today we have the right balance between collateral damage and destruction of the enemy. And I will tell you, our threshold for collateral damage increases with the value of the target we're going after. And, I can assure you, if we're going after Baghdadi's command and control network or some other critical node, then we will go after it as aggressively as necessary to make sure we're succeeding in the campaign.
So it was also reported that we weren't striking the oil trucks because we didn't want to hurt the truck drivers, and that we actually dropped leaflets on them to warn them before we hit them. If that's true, I just want to be clear. I mean, I've been involved in the targeting process at all levels. If you're driving a truck for a terrorist organization that's fueling them, you're a combatant. And can you just clarify what that is all about?
Well, I think, Congressman, we did do that. We did because we assessed that the majority of the truck drivers were, in fact, just people trying to make a living in the region, a little bit different than an enemy combatant from our perspective.
So you don't consider them combatants?
We don't. What we were able to do is separate them from their vehicles and destroy the trucks, which is what we wanted to do.
Okay, last question is it your assessment, General Dunford, that the A-10 has been critical to the fight when it comes to these strikes? It was reported with the AC-130, especially on the trucks, and also their combat search and rescue capability. Is it your assessment they're critical to this fight?
The A-10's been a valuable platform in the fight.
Great. And do you consider this fight is going to go on for a while?
I do.
Great. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Bridenstine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, General, for being here. I want to echo, I have a lot of the same concerns as my colleague, Ms. McSally, and certainly I was involved in the war in Iraq from the beginning, Operation Enduring Freedom. That was, of course, in Afghanistan, but then Southern Watch, and then Iraqi Freedom, shock and awe, all those things. I'd like to follow up on this question about the drivers of these trucks and the leaflets that were dropped. I presume the leaflets told them how to surrender. Is that correct? Because those were the leaflets that we dropped in Iraq the first time around.
The leaflets, first of all, we did a couple of things. We dropped the ordinance in the front of a column and the back of a column, and then dropped leaflets that said, if you don't get away from your vehicle, basically you're going to be bombed. And so that was the message that was sent.
So there was no effort to capture any of the truck drivers or get any kind of intelligence from their operations?
We don't have any forces on the ground that could capture those truck drivers.
Is that a problem?
Well, if you want to capture, Congressman, I'm not trying to flip, but
I'm asking you,
if you want to capture them, you'd have to have someone on the ground to capture them, and we don't.
Is it a problem that we don't have somebody on the ground to capture them?
The lack of human intelligence inhibits our campaign, for sure.
I can imagine. So is that going to be part of what we do going forward, is try to, let me ask this, because I'm just ignorant on this issue. How many ISIS combatants have we captured?
I'd have to get back to you, Congressman.
Is that not a very critical part of trying to win this war?
It is, but I don't have a number of.
Can you give me an estimate? Is it a couple hundred, a couple thousand?
It's probably a handful.
One or two?
It's a handful.
A handful. So like
again,
5 or less?
I'd like to get back to you, Congressman, to talk about that. We have not been involved in combat operations, we, the United States. So we haven't been in a position to capture ISIL.
Now, on these...
Can I just add something?
Sure.
That one of the reasons for the Expeditionary Targeting Force is precisely to gain intelligence. And one of the ways you do that is by capturing people. So I can tell you one person we captured, and that was the wife of Abu Sayyaf.
Where is she now?
And she's being detained.
By whom?
By the government of Iraq.
Of course. So what kind of intelligence are we getting now from that?
We got considerable intelligence. I don't want to go into it further.
Does that not demonstrate the value of human intelligence?
Yeah, of course it
does. So is this something that we're going to change? Are we going to start capturing these folks?
I just said one of the reasons for the Expeditionary Targeting Force is precisely that. That's what I said earlier, and I think it will be a very valuable source of intelligence. And as the chairman said, that is critical to effective employment of air power, to the effective identification of forces that we can enable on the ground.
Let me ask you this: how long were these trucks? How long did we know about them before we destroyed them? Because the New York Times was reporting, or actually it was the Treasury Department, I believe, that reported $10 million a month to fund ISIS through these smuggling of oil operations. Is that correct? $10 million a month. How long did we know that these trucks were being used to fund ISIS before we did anything about it?
Well, we knew there were oil trucks in Iraq from the beginning, of course. What we could not do is distinguish those that were being directly used to finance ISIL. We now have the intelligence to do that, which allows us to effectively isolate them and target them. That's what we're trying to do. We're using the tactic, and we may change our tactics.
So let me ask you,
we're using the tactic.
The truck drivers that ran away, Mr. Secretary, the truck drivers that ran away because we told them to run away, where are they now? Are they now farmers in Syria? I'm just asking the question because this is critically important to trying to win a war, which you're telling us we're trying to do.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding why.
The truck drivers.
Knowing what the truck drivers are doing now is essential to knowing how to win the war.
So the idea is that you believe these people did not know that they were involved in funding ISIS. That's what you're telling us?
Well, they probably knew, if they didn't realize it before, they...
So they knew they were funding ISIS, and they're not enemy combatants? Can you explain that?
I think the chairman already did. These were people who were making a buck, and so we gave them every opportunity to survive the strike.
Mr. Chairman, I'm astonished. We need to learn more about why we didn't destroy these trucks a long time ago, where these enemy combatants are now, why we are dropping leaflets telling them to run away and not surrender. It's quite frankly astonishing if we're trying to win.
I think that's a vote. Mr. Zinke, you have a question right quick?
I do. And thank you, gentlemen, for your service and dedication. It's not easy. I guess I'm somewhat concerned about, my experience about putting forces on the ground, particularly the SF-50. And my concern is that whenever we put forces on the ground, we want to make sure that we have adequate support for them, particularly medevac. My experience with northern Iraq, you can't rely on air all the time. So a ground QRF with some armor would be a good idea. Do you concur that having, I guess, General, for you, that having a sufficient force package would incorporate a in-theater, in-country medevac, QRF, and force security?
Congressman, I can assure you that the kind of package that you're referring to and that you're personally familiar with is and will be in place.
Thank you. And I guess last question is, I'll look at the threats. We have ISIS, Hezbollah, and Al-Qaeda, and North Korea, and emerging China, and Russia. Mr. Secretary, where would you rack and stack global warming with that list?
Well, I think when you think about strategy, you need to think about overall time frames and overall of geography. And so you mentioned China, you mentioned Russia. They haven't been the subject of today's hearing. They were. I had the privilege of speaking before the Simi Valley conference that Chairman Thornberry organized, and my focus there was China and Russia, because we can't forget, and nuclear deterrence has been raised. There are lots of different aspects to this world, and one does need to think in the long term. And I think you ask about global warming or climate change as a military threat. It does change some of our military conditions. We try to be a department that looks ahead. So we are looking ahead at the Arctic and that kind of thing, and how it will change our operations. So
would you agree the imminent threat, the 5-meter threat, the most damaging threat facing us today would be ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and the non-nation state terrorist activities?
Yeah, that's certainly the one that is the most imminent. They're trying to attack us right now. There's nothing distant in time or probability about it.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, again, thank you, gentlemen, for your service. I greatly appreciate it, and God bless.
Much more we could talk about, but y'all have been very patient. Thank you for answering our questions, and I'm just going to warn you, next time y'all come up here, I'm going to suggest to Mr. Smith we start on the bottom 2 rows with our questions, because I think some of the best questions come from our more junior members. With that, the hearing stands adjourned.